On a crisp autumn evening at one of the nation's most renowned television networks, the studio lights shone brightly on an expansive set designed to evoke both sophistication and authenticity. The show was called In the Spotlight, a live cultural program that drew viewers from all corners of the country. Tonight, the program promised an interview that would spark conversation and controversy. The guest was Malik Emerson, a celebrated black artist whose paintings had graced galleries around the world and whose work was known for capturing the raw pulse of urban life, social justice, and hope. His art, rich in texture and meaning, had become a beacon for those searching for truth in a world of superficiality. Seated across from Malik at a sleek wooden table in the studio was Carolyn Bradford, the program's host. Carolyn was known for her razor-sharp wit and provocative style. A veteran journalist with a reputation for not shying away from tough questions, she had built her career on challenging her guests. However, beneath her polished exterior lay a bias that had shaped many of her interviews. Tonight, as the cameras rolled and the audience buzzed with anticipation, Carolyn's demeanor suggested that she was ready to confront what she saw as outdated notions of artistic expression and cultural pride. The opening shot captured Malik sitting quietly, his composed presence contrasting with the frenetic energy of the set. His eyes, deep and thoughtful, scanned the room before he offered a gentle smile to the audience. He was dressed in a tailored blazer and a crisp white shirt that spoke of understated elegance. His hands, though bearing the marks of years of creative labor, moved with a deliberate calm that hinted at a life steeped in passion and perseverance. Carolyn began the interview with a question that, on the surface, seemed routine. "Mr. Emerson," she said in a clear, measured tone, "you have been hailed as one of the most influential voices in contemporary art. Many critics claim your work speaks to the struggles of your community. Tell me, do you believe that your background has limited the scope of your artistic vision?" A murmur passed through the live studio audience. Cameras zoomed in as Carolyn's words hung in the air. A loaded question that hinted at stereotypes many believed were rooted in prejudice. Malik's expression did not waver. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, his voice even and resolute as he answered, "My art reflects the truth of my life and the world I have observed. My experiences, my heritage, and the challenges I have faced have given me a unique perspective. I do not see them as limitations, but as sources of inspiration that inform the way I express beauty, pain, and hope." There was a brief pause as the audience absorbed his answer. Carolyn's eyes flickered with a mixture of surprise and reluctance. She had expected a defensive response, yet Malik's calm and measured tone had disarmed her. "Some might say," Carolyn continued, "that the themes you explore in your work are rather raw and politically charged. How do you respond to critics who claim that your art borders on being more a political statement than a pursuit of aesthetic beauty?" Malik's gaze remained fixed on Carolyn as he replied, "Art is not created in a vacuum. Every brushstroke, every color chosen is a dialogue with the world around us. When I paint, I do so because I see the beauty and the injustice intertwined in our everyday lives. My work speaks to both the joy and the sorrow that define the human experience. I believe that art can and should challenge us, provoke us, and inspire us to imagine a better future." The tension in the studio was palpable. Many in the audience sensed that the interview was evolving into something more than a standard Q&A. Yet Carolyn was not ready to yield ground. In a tone that mixed skepticism with an undercurrent of condescension, she leaned forward and asked, "But do you not think that by focusing on these themes, you might be pigeonholing yourself into a niche? After all, art has the power to transcend politics. Is it not possible that in trying so hard to represent a certain narrative, you risk alienating viewers who might appreciate the more universal qualities of art?" A faint ripple of discontent stirred among some viewers, and a few social media messages began to stream in as the show aired live. Malik's eyes softened, and he took a moment before responding. "Art is universal because it comes from our collective human experience. My work is deeply personal, yet speaks to issues that affect us all. To suggest that addressing the realities of injustice and struggle is somehow less universal, is to overlook the fact that many of us live in a world where beauty and pain coexist. I choose to confront that truth rather than shy away from it. Carolyn shifted in her seat. Her next question carried a sharper edge. Critics have noted that your style is unapologetically bold, almost defiant. Some argue that this defiance might be interpreted as a refusal to evolve or adapt to the changing artistic landscape. Do you think that your approach might be limiting your audience to a specific segment that already agrees with your viewpoint? For a moment, Malik's face remained impassive. Then he answered with a quiet strength. I have never sought to please everyone. I create art that is true to my vision. The measure of art is not in its ability to conform, but in its capacity to provoke thought and stir emotion. The world is vast, and there is room for all forms of expression. I do not concern myself with labels or boundaries. Instead, I focus on the authenticity of my work and its power to resonate with those who see beyond the surface. At that point, the conversation began to take an unexpected turn. Carolyn, known for her acerbic commentary, seemed momentarily taken aback by Malik's unyielding poise. The live studio audience, once polarized between those expecting a combative exchange and those rooting for Malik, now leaned in with an air of anticipation, sensing that something profound was about to unfold. In a deliberate change of tone, Malik continued, his voice quiet yet laden with the weight of experience. I was born into a world that did not always see the beauty in diversity. I have faced criticism and dismissal simply because of the color of my skin and the story I carry within me. For many years, I was told that my perspective was too raw, too unrefined for the mainstream. But I have come to understand that the power of art lies in its ability to reveal truths that many would rather ignore. I paint not for validation, but for survival, for the preservation of my heritage and the expression of a reality that is often hidden from view. The room fell silent as Malik's words reverberated through the studio. The intensity in his eyes told of battles fought quietly, of moments when his voice was drowned out by prejudice and misunderstanding. Carolyn's expression, which had earlier been laced with skepticism, now seemed to waver as she considered his words. In that brief silence, the cameras captured a glimpse of something unexpected, a softness in the host's eyes, a questioning of her own assumptions. Gathering her composure, Carolyn pressed on. You speak of your heritage and your experiences with great passion. But some might argue that in a world that is rapidly changing, your style may appear to cling to a past that is no longer relevant. Do you believe that your art is a bridge to the future or a reminder of what has been left behind? Malik smiled gently, the kind of smile that spoke of both sorrow and hope. I see my art as a bridge that connects the past, present, and future. It is a tribute to the struggles that have shaped our history and a beacon for the possibilities of tomorrow. The past is not something to be left behind. It is the foundation upon which we build our future. Every color I choose, every line I draw, is informed by the legacy of those who came before me and the promise of those who will come after. At this point, the dynamic in the studio began to shift perceptibly. Many viewers watching at home could feel the transformation in the conversation, from a clash of ideologies to an exploration of the universal themes of identity, legacy, and resilience. The air in the studio grew thick with reflection as Malik's words struck a chord with even the most skeptical members of the audience. Carolyn, feeling the weight of the moment, attempted to regain control of the narrative with another pointed question. It is said that art can inspire change and even heal wounds. In your case, do you believe that your work has the power to change perceptions about race and culture? Or is it merely a reflection of your personal journey? Malik paused for a long moment, his eyes wandering briefly as if to recall memories of long-past struggles and victories. Art has the power to move hearts and minds in ways that words alone cannot. I have heard from people who say that my paintings have given them the courage to face their own truths. I have seen art break down barriers, spark dialogue, and even transform lives. My work is deeply personal, but I believe its beauty lies in its ability to connect with others. When someone sees a piece that speaks to their own experiences or challenges their assumptions, that is when art truly fulfills its purpose. A murmur of approval rippled through the studio audience, and even Carolyn's demeanor softened imperceptibly. For a brief second, the usual tension that had defined their exchange gave way to a mutual, if reluctant, understanding that there were deeper truths at stake than simple debate. Yet, Carolyn was not entirely prepared to abandon her ingrained biases. In a final attempt to steer the conversation back to her favored narrative, she interjected, "Some critics have argued that your work, while emotionally charged, tends to be overly politicized. In a time when many are calling for art that unites rather than divides, how do you justify your approach, which some say might alienate potential admirers?" Malik's eyes grew steely with conviction, and he leaned forward, his voice calm and unwavering. Art is never neutral. It is a mirror held up to society. When we ignore the pain, the injustice, and the inequality that many experience, we do a disservice to ourselves and to the communities that are often silenced. My art is not meant to alienate. It is meant to provoke honest reflection. If that reflection leads to division, then perhaps it is because the issues are deeper than any one painting. True unity comes from acknowledging our differences and working together to build a future that honors every voice. For several long moments, the studio sat in quiet contemplation. The tension that had once seemed destined to erupt in conflict was now replaced by an atmosphere of thoughtful introspection. Carolyn, for the first time during the interview, seemed almost uncertain. The cameras zoomed in on her face, capturing the internal struggle as she weighed the significance of Malik's words against the assumptions she had long taken for granted. A pause settled over the room as Malik continued, his tone softening further. "I was raised in a world where the value of my voice was often questioned simply because of the color of my skin. I have faced prejudice and dismissal at every turn. Yet I learned that the only way to overcome that is to remain true to myself. I paint my truth not for accolades, but to honor the stories of those who are often unheard. I believe that if we are to create a more just and compassionate society, we must first acknowledge the pain of our past and then use that understanding to guide us forward." At this point, even Carolyn's voice seemed to falter. Her questions, once sharp and dismissive, now hung in the air like a challenge to her own long-held views. The audience, watching live, responded with a respectful silence, many visibly moved by the sincerity of Malik's message. In the final segment of the interview, the conversation took on an unexpectedly transformative tone. Carolyn's tone, once edged with biting sarcasm, grew subdued as she asked, "Mr. Emerson, what advice would you offer to young artists who come from backgrounds similar to yours? Artists who are fighting not only for their dreams, but also for their right to be heard in a world that often seems determined to silence them?" Malik's eyes shone with a quiet fire as he replied, "I would tell them to embrace every part of their identity and never let anyone diminish their worth. There will always be voices that seek to undermine you, voices that claim you're not enough because you come from a place that they deem inferior. But art is a rebellion against that mindset. It is a declaration that you are here, that your story matters, and that you have the power to change perceptions. Remain steadfast, learn from every challenge, and let your truth be your guide. In the end, it is not the opinions of others that define you, but the courage you show in living your truth." The studio audience erupted into applause. Even Carolyn, whose previous demeanor had been tinged with condescension, could only manage a quiet, respectful nod. The atmosphere had shifted from one of antagonism to that of mutual understanding, a rare moment on live television where two very different perspectives converged on a common truth. After the show ended, the public reaction was overwhelming. Social media buzzed with praise for Malik Emerson, with viewers lauding his courage and eloquence. Articles appeared in major newspapers and online platforms, and many credited the interview with sparking a broader conversation about the role of art in addressing social issues. In the days that followed, Carolyn Bradford faced a barrage of criticism from viewers and fellow journalists alike. Her initial questions and underlying biases were dissected in op-ed pieces and discussion panels, leading her to confront the uncomfortable reality of her own prejudices. In the quiet moments after the broadcast, as Carolyn sat alone in her dressing room, she replayed the interview in her mind. The confidence with which Malik had spoken, the authenticity of his words, and the reaction of the audience all stirred something within her. For years, she had prided herself on being a formidable interviewer, a woman who never shied away from confrontation. Yet now, faced with the undeniable truth of Malik's message, she began to question whether her approach had been driven more by a desire to provoke than to understand. Across the city, Malik Emerson returned to his studio, a modest space cluttered with canvases, brushes, and the remnants of creative fervor. He felt no bitterness from the encounter. Rather, he sensed that his words had planted seeds of change. In the days that followed, he received messages from young artists, community leaders, and even former critics who admitted that his interview had touched them deeply. Malik understood that the journey toward a more just and inclusive world was long and fraught with challenges. But moments like these reminded him that every act of speaking one's truth had the power to transform hearts and minds. Over the next few weeks, the impact of the interview continued to ripple through both the media and society. Several high-profile figures reached out to Malik, inviting him to participate in panel discussions, art festivals, and community projects. His work, once confined to galleries and private collections, began to gain wider recognition as a symbol of resilience and the transformative power of art. Meanwhile, Carolyn Bradford was forced to re-examine her career and the way she approached her role as a journalist. In subsequent episodes of In the Spotlight, she attempted to ask more thoughtful, less loaded questions, though many viewers remained cautious about her newfound tone. One evening, during a follow-up episode, Carolyn invited Malik back onto the set. The atmosphere was noticeably different this time. Gone was the edge of antagonism that had marked their first encounter. Instead, there was a sense of respect and genuine curiosity. Carolyn began by acknowledging the impact of their previous conversation. Last time, our dialogue opened up a space for honest reflection, and I've spent many hours thinking about what was said. I have come to understand that true storytelling is about listening as much as it is about speaking. Mr. Emerson, thank you for giving us that moment of clarity. Malik responded with a warm smile. Thank you for inviting me back. I believe that when we are willing to listen, we can learn so much from one another. Art, in all its forms, is a dialogue, a conversation between the creator and the world. I am grateful to be part of that conversation. As the interview continued, the conversation touched on topics of creative freedom, the importance of preserving cultural identity, and the responsibility of artists to reflect society. Carolyn, now more open and reflective, asked questions that invited Malik to share the inspirations behind his work and the challenges he had overcome. Malik spoke passionately about the influences of his childhood, the impact of historical struggles, and the role of art in healing wounds. The dialogue was enriched by moments of silence, where both host and guest seemed to understand that words alone could not capture the depth of the human experience. Outside the studio, the public continued to debate the implications of that transformative interview. Some critics argued that Carolyn's earlier approach had been unprofessional and biased, while others noted that the evolution in her style was a welcome change. In online forums and televised discussions, the interview was cited as a turning point in how media could engage with issues of identity, culture, and truth. Malik Emerson's name became synonymous with not only artistic excellence, but also with the power of staying true to one's vision in the face of adversity. In the months that followed, Malik's work was featured in major art exhibitions across the country. His paintings, which vividly captured the struggles and triumphs of everyday life, resonated with audiences who saw in them reflections of their own stories. He also began mentoring young artists from underrepresented communities, encouraging them to use their art as a vehicle for change. Through workshops and community projects, Malik dedicated himself to nurturing talent and fostering an environment where diverse voices could flourish. Carolyn Bradford, too, underwent a personal transformation. The backlash from her earlier conduct, coupled with the humbling experience of witnessing Malik's authenticity, led her to embark on a journey of self-reflection. She attended diversity workshops, engaged in dialogues with colleagues from various backgrounds, and slowly began to recalibrate her approach to journalism. In a candid interview with a prominent media critic, she admitted, "I have spent my career trying to elicit controversy, sometimes at the expense of genuine understanding. My encounter with Malik Emerson forced me to confront my own biases and to rethink the way I tell stories. I now believe that the most powerful journalism is not about winning an argument, but about bridging divides and giving voice to those who have been overlooked." The evolution in Carolyn's perspective was not lost on her viewers. Ratings for In the Spotlight soared as audiences appreciated the deeper, more nuanced discussions that emerged in the wake of her transformation. Many sent messages of gratitude, sharing how the show had inspired them to examine their own preconceptions and to strive for greater empathy in their interactions with others. One particular evening, as the network aired a special edition of the show dedicated to the role of art in social change, Carolyn introduced a segment that featured interviews with several emerging artists alongside Malik. The set was bathed in soft light, and the atmosphere was intimate, as if inviting viewers to step into a world where creativity and vulnerability were celebrated. Among the guests was a young painter whose work, inspired by Malik's journey, had begun to gain local acclaim. The conversation was filled with moments of laughter, heartfelt admissions, and a shared hope for a future where art could be a unifying force. Throughout the evening, the dialogue remained centered on the power of art to inspire change. Malik spoke at length about the need to honor one's heritage while embracing innovation. He recounted stories from his early days as an artist, describing how every challenge he faced became a stepping stone toward finding his unique voice. His words resonated deeply with the audience, reminding them that even in a world filled with noise and division, there was always space for truth and beauty. As the special edition drew to a close, Carolyn offered a final reflection. "Tonight, we have witnessed not only the beauty of art, but the beauty of transformation. In our journey through life, we all have moments when we must choose between clinging to old ways and embracing a new way of seeing the world. I hope that our conversation today serves as a reminder that growth comes from listening, from questioning, and ultimately from understanding each other. Thank you, Mr. Emerson, for sharing your truth and for reminding us that the courage to be ourselves is the greatest art of all." Malik's eyes shone with gratitude as he replied, "Thank you, Carolyn, for allowing me to share my story. Art is a conversation that never truly ends. It lives in every stroke of the brush, in every heartbeat of those who see it. I hope that together we can continue this dialogue and build a future where every voice is valued." The studio erupted in applause as the camera panned over the captivated audience. In that moment, the legacy of the interview was cemented. It was no longer just a television segment. It had become a catalyst for change, a testament to the transformative power of truth and empathy. The exchange between Malik Emerson and Carolyn Bradford, with all its tension, honesty, and vulnerability, had sparked a conversation that reached far beyond the confines of the studio. In the weeks and months that followed, the impact of that evening rippled through the media landscape. Social media platforms buzzed with discussions about the interview, with hashtags celebrating Malik's wisdom and urging for more inclusive, thoughtful journalism. Educational institutions invited both Malik and Carolyn to speak about the intersection of art, media, and social change, and their conversation was later compiled into a documentary that examined the role of personal transformation in shaping public discourse. Malik continued to inspire through his art. His latest exhibition, titled Echoes of Resilience, toured major cities, drawing large crowds and critical acclaim. Each piece in the collection told a story of struggle, hope, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. Meanwhile, Carolyn found herself at a crossroads in her career, committed to pursuing a path of genuine storytelling and using her platform to highlight voices that had long been marginalized. Although the journey was not without setbacks, her willingness to confront her own prejudices began to mend old wounds and open new avenues for understanding. As autumn turned to winter and the days grew shorter, the memory of that fateful interview continued to resonate. For many viewers, it had been a turning point, a moment when the barriers of bias and division were challenged by the sheer force of authenticity. In the quiet hours after the broadcast, both Malik and Carolyn reflected on the transformative power of their encounter. Malik, in his humble studio, picked up his brush and began to paint with renewed vigor, knowing that every color on the canvas was a symbol of hope. Carolyn, sitting in her office late at night, reviewed her notes and listened to recordings of the interview, recognizing that her true strength lay not in belittling others, but in the ability to learn and grow from the exchange of ideas. The legacy of that evening was felt not only in the art world or the realm of journalism, but across society. People from all walks of life found inspiration in the simple yet profound message that had emerged from the conversation. That the most important conversations are the ones that force us to look within ourselves, to question our assumptions, and to embrace the truth that lies in every heart. It reminded everyone that while voices may differ in tone and perspective, the common desire for connection, understanding, and respect binds us all. In the end, In the Spotlight became more than a television program. It evolved into a platform for dialogue and transformation. Malik Emerson's words, delivered with quiet dignity and unwavering conviction, left an indelible mark on the hearts of those who listened. And Carolyn Bradford, once known for her biting remarks and narrow viewpoints, began a journey of redemption through the power of honest introspection and a commitment to change. As the credits rolled on that groundbreaking episode, the message was clear. True art is not confined to a canvas, and genuine journalism is not measured by the force of its rhetoric, but by the impact of its truth. In a world that often seemed overwhelmed by noise and division, the quiet power of integrity, empathy, and the courage to be oneself shone brightly. A reminder that every brushstroke of truth can pave the way for a better tomorrow. And so, the story of that transformative evening lived on, inspiring a generation to seek out voices of wisdom, to challenge their own preconceptions, and to believe in the enduring power of art and honest conversation. It was a story that celebrated the beauty of diversity, the strength found in vulnerability, and the timeless truth that when we dare to listen, we find the courage to truly see one another.